Hi, I'm Brice Ominski, Chief Technology Officer with Deep Dive World, and my guest today for the Chief Architect Forum is Arun Sanna. Arun, you go by the title Enterprise Architect and Chief Nerd. I love that because I love to get into things. So let's get right into this today, Arun. When we were talking ahead of time, we were really talking about things not really being, ready for prime time. So you've done a lot of work with Department of Defense, getting systems up to speed. You've done a lot of work with startups, and maybe we can just talk a little bit about your background before we go into some of the major topics.
Awesome. Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Arun, and so my experience, I want to dive into that. I started working for startups after my graduation. So I did my computer science degree in California State University, Los Angeles, and after that, jumped into a startup. The focus of the first startup was how can you actually help customers migrate into cloud? That's where I started. How do you help large organizations automate their infrastructure provisioning and also deal with the management of the migration and everything? So that actually grew big from the startup, and it got acquired by a large company called Hitachi Vantara. So in 2018, and then my like thoughts for working for more startups didn't die. So I moved to another startup, Vivsoft Technologies. Their main focus was actually helping the government, um, Department of Defense, and also federal agencies, because these are systems which are critical for a national security, and also helping the government. How can you actually save tax dollars, and how can you efficiently use tax dollars instead of just paying for licenses to manage all these stuff. The first project I very proud of is being part of United States Air Force's Platform One project, which is P1.DSO.mil. So this is actually Department of Software. So Chief Software Officer actually looking for a way to actually modernize DoD's legacy systems. That's where his name is Nick. So he wrote a paper how to build enterprise DoD software factories to
Yes.
accelerate the delivery in the DoD side, because DoD is the place where people spend a lot of money, and
Yes.
every project is almost over budget, or they don't actually deliver on time. It's 30 years behind, 50 years behind. So his main goal was actually that's one thing. How can we actually modernize the existing systems? And second thing is Silicon Valley startups mostly they go from a build to delivery in months. Where if I want to do something for DoD, it takes years to actually go behind all these red tapes and fix all this stuff. That's where the
So,
yeah.
so Arun, when you look at these systems, a lot of the stuff you're looking at, it sounds like you have a lot of legacy modernization kind of issues that you really need to hit
Yeah.
head on. Is that a big thing? Is like how much of a challenge is that?
Yeah, it's a big challenge because these web applications mostly were built by independent contractors for the government. So government gives these small systems to small companies for to large companies where they actually don't think alike. They just build integrations into a system to just make it work instead of working on some similar framework.
Mhm.
So that's where it's a constant problem that now you need to maintain that one. So some independent team changes it. So now you need to actually that may break your applications, which you need to fix. So things
Yes.
like that. And in order to fix these things, it's not as easy process like going and changing a single line of code. It takes months to push that change in to push to the prod. So that's why it takes a lot of time.
That's interesting. So do you think that we need something when you're talking about the integrations that we're dealing with here? What I'm getting from this, it's almost like, okay, that system comes in, let's do the integrations. That system goes in, let's do it. Do we need to spend more focus on what some might call strategic integrations? and being able to connect them into better architectures? Like, what are the big challenges there?
Yeah, you're 100% right. Like kind of like we need to build like kind of like better architectures that can talk to each other, mainly like fault tolerant systems. Kind of like when we are building on these things, like it's not just like hard, like kind of like hard coded to
Yeah,
a outside system. Instead, like keeping it more flexible, kind of like fall back and kind of like not break on when something changes in a different system.
very interesting. So we're moving forward into the world right now. I think one of the things that's really big is going to be intelligent systems, AI, large language models. And, we've seen, one of the things we talked about, we've seen a lot of people doing a lot of stuff in sandboxes, like toy systems. But moving it to the real world is really challenging. What are some of the obstacles there, and how do you think we need to move these systems to the real world?
Yeah. So interesting thing was actually AI is like as you said, like it advancing like super fast, and like people are getting into this like fear of missing out, like the FOMO of like kind of like okay, so how to use this, where to use this, and it's like kind of like what I see. It's a pattern that like they're kind of like missing the fundamentals. Like some I
Mm,
saw a team where like they spent 4 months on writing code without using a version control on their code, things like this.
holy,
So yeah, so it's like 4 months and kind of like he actually built a system and like without version control, and then like AI started rewriting the whole system and it broke it. So he never was able to build a really stable system. And other place where someone built the system and then like kind of like hard coded all his API keys into that application, hosted his system, then people start attacking him, running his credit cards,
yeah,
and it took like 7 days to go like kind of like he closed that like whole application.
yeah,
So that's where kind of like there is a traditional way of like building these things where like kind of like you understand the requirement where what you are trying to build first, that is the one, and then
yes,
kind of like go through this framework of product development where like kind of like okay, what is definition of my MVP, and kind of like then ideate, plan, and then like break them into multiple tasks and create a workflow, and then build a system that actually can like kind of like deliver these things like kind of from the development to testing to going into live. So and if I start like using AI tools, AI is like today it may be intelligent, like kind of like to do all these things in future, but today it's not. So I think that's where like people kind of like need to work with AI to have these things. So don't just give AI to like do vibe code. So that's something that people are doing now,
yep.
like vibe coding, trusting AI completely, kind of like, okay, so let's build this one. It's good for some places, but sometimes it may break your entire code where like kind of like now it will be like it's when you build a product, it's something that you know. When you give it to
Yep.
AI, it turns something into a black box where now you don't know where code is. Now you need to go and read it, which your intention was, I don't want to spend more time on fixing issues. Instead, now you will end up more time on identifying these issues.
So, Arun, let me ask you, you talked about fear of missing out, and you did a great little article on this. And there's 2 points you really raised I'd like you to comment on. The one point is collectors of tools that are getting all these AI tools that do very little, and we get this toolbox. We collect junk, basically, right?
Yep.
And the other one is contrasting that with what Jensen Huang has said, that the future developers need to work from first principles. What are your thoughts? What do the future developers need to do?
So the first thing is actually kind of like what like kind of like from my understanding, like learn code, understand at least like how the code actually works. So there was like a lot of like, I don't know, like maybe like influencer driven push that like you don't need to learn code. You can just like trust AI to build your system. So that's something that like kind of like understand. If you don't know, learn. If you don't understand it, hire people who can actually help you with all these things. And be like kind of like AI, your like trusted partner in building it, but
Yeah.
you own your product instead of like AI owning it. So using those like kind of like you can actually kind of like build a really good product. Otherwise, you will end up spending more time in like building a product that you don't know how it actually works. Like think about like your car, like you don't know like nothing about your car and you bought it and now you just like kind of like you don't know how to fix it. So if it like breaks down, that's it. Like it's completely gone. So things like that. So that's where like kind of like I kind of like encourage most of the developers who are in like their mid junior levels learn that and then take your time to actually kind of like build it and build it in small pieces. Don't try to like kind of like boil the ocean, like kind of like, hey, build me like a bank. So don't do that. So build small pieces and then understand and then stitch them together. That will create a story and will have you like kind of like control like what you are building and then deliver to your customer. Not everything at once. Use agile, deliver
Yeah.
bits and pieces, deliver it incrementally, and listen to the customers what actually they care about. Not you care about, not AI cares about what they want to use. Get that feedback and build those things instead of building like Google's like cheap flight ticket finder. That won't help anyone. Like so build something matters.
So Arun, you said, and I quote, the goal isn't to flex your AI muscles, it's to ship something that works. So leash the overzealous intern and make sure it's simplifying, not complicating. Otherwise, you will just build a house of cards that's waiting to collapse. It seems that you're very pragmatic in your advice about getting going. Is that fair? Like, don't pick up AI tools just because they're there. Pick up what you need to pick up. Well, how do you know what you need?
Yes. So that's where like kind of like I kind of like spent my 4 weeks and learned my lessons of like I went after every single tool. Kind of like I got some downtime and like kind of like okay, let's see like how many tools are in AI because every day someone releases a tool and tells like it broke all the benchmarks. It's working really good. So and today it's Cloud, tomorrow it's OpenAI, next day it's DeepSeek, next day it's Mistral. So but the thing was actually kind of like what I understood at the end of the day is actually kind of like, what am I trying to solve? Like, what will make my life easy? So instead of spending 5 hours on like doing something in AWS console, how can I actually do it in less than 10 minutes? So
Yeah.
now I have the problem. Now let's pick one AI tool, like just like OpenAI or anything
Yeah.
make like understand how it works because every AI tool have their own prompting, like kind of like how you structure the prompt and everything. If you actually kind of like ask really good questions, it will give you really good answers. So basically get better at asking questions for like use one tool. Get better at asking questions. Once you start like solving your problems, gain the time back. That's like 10 hours you are going to spend. Now you can do it in 1 hour. You gain that 9 hours. Now go pick another problem. So then you will understand kind of like how to do it. So, and also like kind of like don't buy yearly subscription because you will end up paying a lot of money for all these things. Just pick one, understand how that tool works, participate in the communities and how people are solving those problems. And that's what actually kind of like helped me understand. So I use Claude a lot. And like people were like kind of like OpenAI is amazing, DeepSeek is amazing. I was like kind of like why it is amazing. So kind of like when I compared it, when I asked it like better questions, I got better answers. So it's better to actually stick to just one, and then like solve the problems. And that's what actually kind of like led me thinking about like, okay, so what is my first problem? My first problem was actually kind of like if I'm actually a cloud engineer, and biggest thing was I was like, who deleted my storage account? So if that is my question, I actually go to like kind of like cloud and then like look into cloud trails and then like search for these things, which takes almost 1 hour. Then I kind of like, okay, so if I'm having this problem, how can I do it? That's when I started like, how can cloud solves that problem? Then went into community, that's when I found MCPs, model context protocols, where I can connect my Claude to my AWS CLI and let it build the queries, run the queries, and I can ask questions in plain English. that like kind of like, can you tell me like who deleted these S3 buckets? It can go talk to AWS, get the answer I want, and then give it to me. So in a presentable way, kind of like this guy deleted this bucket at this time, and this is what happened after that. So, and that solved my problem. So then I open sourced that whole MCP kind of like, okay, so now I want community kind of let's collaborate on like improving this tool. So that solved one problem. Then I moved to another one. So that's where kind of like I see it's like you go solve the problems that are bothering you, and then kind of like like add more problems to your bucket and solve those problems. So that's when like you kind of like truly get those like AI benefits.
So that's interesting. You brought up model context protocols. That's a big thing right now. And the idea is if you want to connect to a large language model and you have a bunch of different tools, you want to actually use the MCP as sort of a middle tier. Is this sort of the way forward right now in terms of linking tools to large language models, or what are your thoughts on that approach?
So I used to actually build programs before. Mostly like these are tools like before, like kind of like you use AWS SDKs or like any cloud SDKs to build these things and write functions, right? The biggest thing that I saw the change was kind of like functions. When I used to write Python, like Python functions where I pass arguments. These arguments are kind of like a definite set of arguments. I can only ask this question so I can build a logic to solve that problem. Where MCP completely changes the game of like you can ask a question in a plain English and then kind of like it's more flexible. Now think about like my function when I write it in Python, I provide some arguments, it returns me some like outputs. So and it will look for, hey, it got a JSON output from the query. It looks for a particular field and everything. If those things changes in our previous story, right? Like kind of like these integrations, if AWS SDK changes its output, my function completely breaks. But in MCP's context, it doesn't actually do that one. My function is super flexible that if even AWS output gets changed, because that happened to me multiple times when I'm using Terraform. They change something, AWS Cloud SDK changes something, Terraform need to fix that one. Now my Terraform code actually is failing. So they need to actually do like really hot fix fast. And now with MCPs, it doesn't fail because now it actually digests the whole output, even that is changed. It understands the context and gives me the answer I am looking for without rewriting my code. So that's why like I think like it's a game changer of like kind of like because these are agent text and also the functions concept is completely changing with MCPs, which will kind of helps the engineers like kind of like with not under like kind of like writing these complex. Now they don't need to deal with all these edge cases. Now there is no edge case. Your AI is intelligent enough to understand that edge case and give you an answer. So
So
that's the MCP solves that problem.
great, I really appreciate that explanation. And I have to ask you this as an enterprise architect and a nerd at the same time. How important do you think is it that you actually understand what we're doing as enterprise architects, being able to code it, actually run it through and understand what the code does? Is that essential for an architect to understand that?
Um, I think I don't think like kind of like I want like kind of like architects like not to hardcore developers. I don't want them to like kind of like go write it, but they want to like kind of my like architects mostly like kind of like when I work with someone like a tele architects understand how these things actually work, every piece of it. So every communication like in the bigger picture developers are like the ones who are working on the ground. So that's like kind of like your focus is so narrow, you're building and delivering that particular feature. But architect is like 10 steps away, like kind of like you are looking at a bigger picture of like how these all things communicate together that actually provides a huge solution. So I don't want like kind of like architects spending time on writing code, but instead understand like what is the bigger problem that they are trying to solve and break this and simplify it so a developer can understand what their responsibility to deliver so they can focus on delivering that through code.
I got you. So, in terms of going forward, one of the things we started to cover and maybe just sort of return to is this idea of a lot of the systems we're seeing right now are being done in sandboxes. Like we started to talk about this. There's huge obstacles to bringing that into the real world. What do you think, in terms of if I'm trying to do that sort of stuff, what is the minimum set of first principles that I need to work with? What do I need in my AI toolkit basically to understand this and get to real world implementation?
Awesome. Like that's really like kind of some things that I was actually researching about from a couple of weeks. So I read this like kind of like Claude, which I actually follow a lot, Anthropics. They released a tool called Claude Code. So how to build the projects, right? So I was like there, like Twitter, like one of their PM, she was actually putting all the release notes. So I was trying to understand kind of like, okay, so in order to build a real project, how can I actually do that one? Like, so turning my idea into reality. So that's like kind of like instead of just like going and vibe coding and all that stuff. So basically, kind of like you do like kind of like PRD, like kind of like a project resource document. That's where like we start first. Kind of like, okay, so what are you trying to solve? Like the goal. In order to achieve that goal, what you need to do. Like, let's build a workflow of things. Kind of like, I want like a front end, I want a back end, I want like a database to solve this problem. Then, kind of like expand everything. I want to use front end. What technology you want to use? I don't want you to kind of like go deep into the code, but at least like put some sort of guidelines for this thing. So, how to do that? So, and when I looked into Claude, I asked them like kind of like if I want to start something with AI, brand new, where do I start with? And that's what they was kind of like, you need to create a PRD document and name it as claude.md as a markdown. Create an empty repository, first plan it, understand, and then define everything. What's your goal? What you want to achieve? Then let AI use those guidelines, understand like kind of like these guidelines. So if you are not clear about your project, you're basically kind of like just like freestyling. So don't do that one. So you should be very kind of like you are giving directions, kind of like you are a business owner now. Your AI is your 10x engineer. And 10x engineers kind of like they freestyle, like they just like go randomly. You need to kind of like put some guardrails around it and guidelines. So that's something that you need to define first and then let AI consume it. And that's what I did. Like one of the article I was publishing about like in the FOMO, I gave like took two cases of like
Yes.
I want to build a website with a financial website. They kind of gave us a simple goal. And I asked it the same AI with two like same question, like kind of like one session in VS Code, another session in other VS Code, same Sonnet 7, kind of like, hey, this is what I want to build. Can you build it? One said it created Node.js project, which is completely not necessary. It like wrote hundreds of files, created hundreds of files, wrote thousands of lines of code for a simple HTML project. In the other one, it created like kind of like a three web like files with the same website. If I open it, they're exactly same, but in one way they're it's the same because AI is unpredictable. If you don't put guardrails around it, it will just freestyle it, which will become a nightmare. So that's where like I want to start with kind of like when you want to start a project with under like right guidelines, what you are
So,
trying to
so
solve.
everyone, let's just sort of dig into that for a second. You have these two requests,
Mm-hmm.
and I looked at the article, and the requests look pretty much the same, right? And you get
Yeah,
this one which is like crazy big, right? And maybe it
yeah.
did something more than the other one. I don't know. But how do you know with what you're getting? Like, is the code is? I'm also familiar with another situation where there was like a leak in the code and nobody could find it, and then they had to use the AI to find it. Are we getting into that position where we have to use AIs to determine if the code itself is ready to go?
It I sometimes yes, but like for testing and everything, like kind of like you can use AI because for me, like kind of like I can test it manually by using
Yep.
tools and everything. But the thing was actually kind of like writing these test cases is something that takes a lot of time. And that's where kind of like one of the other project that I like kind of like talked about is Fuzzy Lamp is one of the project that I created. My goal was actually kind of like, hey AI, I built this project. Now I want to create I want to reach 100% code coverage for this project. And it actually did like 90%. And after that, like it started like going into like a fail mode, like kind of like I tried it, I failed it. That's where like I need to intervene, kind of like get to the 100%, right? So yes, AI will definitely help you to get your product to ready state. And it basically what I can tell it is an accelerator to get to the readiness state. It won't actually kind of like take you to ready state. It will accelerate the process, but it still needs human. Like that's what like I understood. I reached like 90% code coverage in less than half an hour, and then I need to talk to AI after that because hey, like you can use like I have to give ideas to AI, kind of like can you do monkey patching? That's where like I was like kind of like going back to where like you need to understand sometimes like code and like these things. So you can ask AI because it's your co-pilot. So you can throw AI is around like some ideas, kind of like, can you do that? Can you try this? Because it tries again and again, it burns all my tokens, costs me a lot because now I'm going for perfection of 100%. It is doing it from 1 hour, a lot of tokens burned, $50, $60 burned in like 1 hour. I'm not reaching the goal. So I have to like stop it and tell that one, okay, so this is what you are doing. Can you try something else? So that's where like I need to intervene and give some ideas. So that's when like kind of like it fixed it, reached 100% of it. So that's when like I was like kind of like more like, okay, so you still need human in the loop because I listen to like all in part like David Sachs come in like they have like this really interesting question about where like Chamath was asking about hey like kind of like AI is going to come in, it will kill the jobs of people, like kind of like it will take out the jobs and all that. That's when like David Sachs was talking about hey like kind of like when that's what they thought about when Airbnb came in, like kind of they thought like hotel industry will just like go bankrupt when like a banking tellers, like ATMs came in that will destroy the bank teller's job. No, it expanded everything. And also when
Yeah.
Uber came in, people thought it will end the taxi driver's business. No, it won't. Even AI when come in, like kind of like people think like, okay, so they're automating all these test cases and all that. But that's where I found out, oh yeah, humans are still needed. Kind of like they need to co-program, co-pair with AI to actually build a really stable, secure product. Otherwise, you will end up, as you said, with API keys inside them, which AI can actually do it, but AI may not know. AI will tell like, oh, you never asked me to check, so I just shipped your product. So that's where human need to tell like, hey, can you go check all these things? So that's where like these guidelines and human in the loop comes in.
So there's an interesting discussion with Jensen Wong again, where he said, we envision a company where every employee has 1,000 virtual AIs working for them. And my question is, if I'm doing sort of this work to prove concepts, kind of like the developer architect, how many AIs do I actually need working for me? Is it one? Is it 100? Like, is there a benefit to 1,000 AIs working for me?
Uh, yeah, like kind of like so. I think like Jensen's idea was like kind of like which something I agree with is like the boiling the ocean concept where like kind of like I don't want to give AI to just like do everything. I want like kind of like build smaller modules that can actually do something for me. And that's what kind
Almost
of like
specialized. Is that kind of where
yes.
you're going? Okay.
Yes, the specialized ones. Some are specialized in kind of like tackling with my emails. Some are actually specialized in like tackling with like my coding problems. Because the thing is actually kind of like like the models, if you see that one today, there are like 700 billion parameters. And Jensen was talking about trillion parameters. So it's kind of like the LLMs, they are like kind of like they're like excelled at everything. Like they're building like most intelligent system on everything. But sometimes you don't need most intelligent system. You want an expert on like just one thing, which you can actually run on your small system. Kind of like think about like in manufacturing, like kind of like, hey, like your job is actually kind of like take a cardboard box, pack it, put the product in, tape it, add the address to that one, and ship it. That's all they want. You don't want like because in order to run these LLMs, you need a lot of compute. So that's why like kind of like I think like you was saying like take their like instruct models, train them and fine tune them with their data, which your company needs, especially. So whatever you want. So that means it will be expert or solving your problem, and it will just like kind of like just do the task. So for each task, that's what like agentic AI comes in into the picture of like where every agent of mine is an expert. And that's what like kind of like DeepSeek did. Also, they call this like model of experts, right? MOEs. And like kind of like you have multiple MOEs that work. Internally, it does the same thing, kind of like expert models. And then like when expert model, like you can actually fine tune it, make it really spawn, task specific, and all these things working together to solve a bigger problem. So you can actually kind of like need less compute. That's it. So not every company wants like they don't want to run whole LLM to solve that. Some companies just need a chatbot on answering questions from their website, like for 200 pages. Why do you need to run an LLM for that? So just use a small one to do this. And your internal HR, you need a small agentic bot, things like that. So which answers the questions about your health insurance policy, your PTO policy, all that stuff. So things like that. So small things which were easy to manage.
Let me ask you a kind of a final question as we go into this, almost final question. If I'm trying to set up a development environment using AI tools, maybe I'm working in Visual Studio, what do you think is the essential toolkit that I need?
So I tested Visual Studio. I am a heavy user of Visual Studio, and Visual Studio has their beta product called Visual Studio Insiders. So if you are like want to test true like kind of like AI features, follow their release notes. That's very, very important because VS Code is coming up with native integrations. They're improving their Copilot a lot. So, and it is cheaper. And you don't need to pay for every model like OpenAI and everything. Copilot is like one place where you can actually do anything. So what I do, my setup is VS Code Insiders, and they're having two versions of it: Edit, Agent, and Ask models.
Yes.
So it's Insiders, so you can just like use it. You can select any model you want. They have a drop down on like kind of like Claude Sonnet, Sonnet 7, Sonnet 5, or like OpenAI. They have integrations. They're adding more models now. The recent feature, and the most important thing is read their release notes. They will tell you like how to use these things. That's the most important thing. That's what I do. I go to release notes because I'm on beta. I will have to get releases, unstable releases, almost one release every 2 days. And that's what I do. Go to release notes, read what features they included, and like how can I take advantage of these features. And also like these like they are now releasing guidelines, so I can set up guidelines for my AI. So I don't like switching between multiple tools. So VS Code for me is open source, and Copilot is a subscription based. That's something that like I saw it's like cheaper compared to others. It's I think like $10 a month now. I think it's the cheapest one that is available in the market, and also providing OpenAI, Claude, and also like now they are supporting Flash. For the Google, they're supporting multiple. They're supporting Open Router. So Open Router is mostly kind of like if I don't want to pay for anything and I still want to use Copilot, then you can use go to Copilot, open it, and then you can click on like manage models under the drop down. You will see Open Router function. If you go to Open Router website, you will have like so many open source model hosted for free. That's something you can do. And if you are using it in like some a federated or like a more restrictive environment, there are some products that are actually coming out. There is one for the DoD. Ask Sage is one company they're doing for DoD, and there are like you can locally run using Olama, like host a small models. If you go to deep, like kind of like a Hugging Face, you can look for the models which are exactly really good at code. You can download those models, host it locally. Now your VS Code, if you go to manage models, it supports Olama too. That means it's one interface that I really like. It supports MCPs, it supports local models, it supports open source models, it also supports the closed source models like OpenAI and everything. So, and if you learn that, I think it will be a game changer. So it will, I definitely change your life and gives time back to you.
Awesome. Arun, is there any final questions that I should have asked or comments that you want to make before we leave? Any message that you want to send out to anybody out there?
Um, Nothing. Like I think like we covered everything. Mostly
Great.
like one message I gave it to everyone was just like start small and like kind of like then go big. Like don't start big and like kind of like it will be a nightmare.
Absolutely. It was a real pleasure. I hope we can talk again. Arun, this was wonderful. Thank you so much.
No problem. It's nice talking to you.
Cheers.